Hey everyone, it's Mike Eilon with Greek University, and we are here with Fraternity Foodie. And where we got that name from is because there is nothing like really good food to bring people together. So that's why we call these segments Fraternity Foodie. And we are going to continue to ask some of the difficult questions, but also we're going to find out where our guests love to eat as well. So stay tuned at the end of the program in order to find out where our guests love to eat and what they order. So today we are at episode number 20, a big even number, and we have a special treat here with Christy Brooks. Christy is the director of Live Empowered, an organization that focuses on helping young people with their struggles with self-esteem and also with identity in order to prevent things like depression, self-injury, eating disorders, substance abuse, and also bullying. So I think this is going to be a fantastic conversation for everybody in higher ed, no matter who you are, student, administrator, whatever. So welcome to the show, Christy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey, it's my pleasure. So let's get started right away. I know that you suffered from a lack of value and self-worth growing up. So how did that experience help you as you were pastoring young adults at your local church?
I did. I experienced a serious lack of value and self-worth that really impacted me all through my teenage years and even into my early 20s. And I think the biggest thing that did for me was to create empathy. So from the age of 14, I felt so much pressure to be perfect and to seek the approval of other people that I really started to dislike myself. I started to hate the parts of me that weren't perfect and that couldn't be successful. And from that, I actually started to hurt myself, to cut myself. And so when you have low self-esteem like that, and you don't understand that as an individual, that you have a unique value just because you're you and in your imperfect state, you actually look for ways to medicate that pain. And for me, that was cutting. So for me, that was, I would medicate my pain through cutting. For other people, it might be other things. But what I found as I walked through that and came out the other side, that when I would look at those young people that I was pastoring, that I would identify with that I would say, hey, I see the actions that you're doing and they're destructive and they're destroying your life. But even more than that, I see where they come from and I see how much you're hurting inside. And I see that dark place and I can see how to care for that and how to help you walk out of that. And that's really empathy. And when you have that empathy, you can be that safe place so that someone is able to be open and talk without the fear of judgment. And because even if I don't have the exact same story, it's still that same underlying struggle. And I can see how easy it would be to end up in any destructive place. And so I think the empathy is the biggest thing that I've taken with me into pastoring young adults.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that you ran an organization called MAM or MAM as a project of the church affiliation for many years. And then eventually you decided to start Live Empowered as a nonprofit in 2013. So why did you make that switch from the church affiliation to this nonprofit in 2013? And why did you focus on specific areas, including Tennessee, Michigan, and North Dakota?
Yeah, so I absolutely loved being a project of the Anchor Fellowship. It was a fantastic time in my life. It was the perfect fit. I was a staff pastor there for 10 years. And because I was just working with college students, we started MAM at that time really to meet those young people in those dark places. So we were meeting those young people in their lowest place and we were helping them walk out of that. And it was amazing and I was loving it. And then in 2013, we had the opportunity to put some prevention programs in some of the public schools in Middle Tennessee. And from there, we started to expand and wanted to work with some other organizations. And what we found at that point was that these issues, these problems that young people are facing today are way bigger than one church. They're way bigger than one organization. And we realized that the easiest way that we could connect with lots of organizations both faith-based and not faith-based, was to incorporate on our own. So in 2013, we took a huge step and incorporated and became our own nonprofit. And since then, we have just been slowly growing in what we hope is a healthy way so that we can equip more people to make a bigger impact on young people around the United States. And Tennessee, Michigan, and North Dakota, like, who would have thunk it? Those were natural connections that I had made, relationships that I had with other nonprofits, other churches, and other organizations in those states. And ironically, those states all have very high suicide rates, very high teen self-harm rates, and they didn't have a lot of resources. So we started our partnership in North Dakota on Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. When we started that partnership, they were having 10 teen suicide attempts or ideations every single month. And it was shocking, and there were no resources. And so where there's a need, I feel like we have to go. I feel like it's our responsibility. And I feel like it's my responsibility as someone who had a resource and was able to walk out of my hurt and destructive patterns. I want to be there and help everyone else that can do that if I have the resources to do it. And so that's why we began those relationships. And obviously Tennessee, I'm from Nashville. I love Nashville. I love the people here. And I feel like it's my responsibility to be here to equip this city. So those are very random connections, but that's how they came about.
I completely understand. For many times I was working for my fraternity headquarters, and yes, we have 100,000 members. Yes, we have tons of students on 120 college campuses, but I recognize the same thing that you did, which is that there's a lot of people out there that are having these issues, if we're talking about sexual assaults or hazing or alcohol and drug abuse. And it just, to me, it didn't make any sense just to focus just on members of my own organization. To me, it was a much larger problem than that. And if I really wanted to get to the root of this and really fix it, the only way to do that is to kind of open up the doors and say, you know what, we're going to work on every single college campus, not just the ones that have my organization on it, right? So I completely understand where you're coming from there. One of the things that I noticed was suicide. I noticed that suicides were happening within my own organization with greater frequency on college campuses every single year. That number just kept creeping up. And apparently the statistics also seem to back that up. Over 1 million people attempted suicide in 2017. And interestingly enough, white males account for 60% of all suicides. So what is the cause, and what are the warning signs that we should be looking out for on college campuses?
It's heartbreaking, and it's a tough question because the numbers are so big that you just said that, like, your brain can't even wrap around them. Like 1 million individual people tried to kill themselves. They reached the point that they were so hopeless that the best thing that they could think of to do was to end their life. And that's, to me, that's heartbreaking. Like, that's devastating. But yes, you're right. The college campus suicides, the frequency goes up every year. Suicide is going up every year. In a country where we have every opportunity, where we have everything, where we could be anyone we want, the loneliness and the isolation and the hopelessness is so overwhelming that we are choosing to end our lives. And I think that those three things, hopelessness, loneliness, and isolation, are the reasons that suicide rates are going up. Men, so you mentioned white males accounting for 60% of the suicides. Men aged 25 to 45 are the least touched demographic in the United States. No one touches men. And men are taught from a very young age in our culture to bottle up their feelings. You're supposed to man up. You're supposed to just deal with life. And so I think that men deal with isolation and loneliness on an even deeper level than women do. The other thing about men accounting for the majority of the suicides is that men are more likely to attempt their suicide using a deadly weapon. So they'll use a gun. Whereas a woman is going to use a different type of method to attempt suicide that is going to have a less of a chance of a success. So those are really, I think, the reasons that men account for the majority of it. But it all comes down to whether you're a man or a woman, it's feeling that isolation, feeling like you're alone, and feeling like you have no one to talk to. And that leads to hopelessness. And when you lose hope, the best thing that you can do is to kill yourself and end it. And that's devastating. So yeah, it is so important, especially in college campuses. And college campuses have this thing where you have secondary suicides. So you have a classmate or a friend or someone that you know that commits suicide. Well, within a few months, several people that have some sort of contact with that person will then also commit suicide or at least attempt suicide. So it is a place you want to be really aware of warning signs. Some high risk warning signs that honestly they may seem really silly that I would even have to say it, but we don't know. But somebody who's talking about killing themselves or maybe threatening to hurt themselves, that's a high risk warning sign. You want to take that real seriously. If you have a classmate or a friend who is talking about death or writing about death, dying, or suicide, so maybe you have a friend who most of their papers that they're writing are on the topic of suicide or death, that's kind of a warning sign too. Maybe they're not exactly thinking about killing themselves immediately, but death and dying is what's in their head a lot because that's what's coming out. Somebody who is actively looking for or making a plan to kill themselves, so maybe they're stockpiling pills or maybe they buy a gun. Those are really high risk signs. If you see somebody who's doing that, you want to immediately ask them, what's going on? What is going on inside of you? Let's talk about this. How do we bring in some outside help maybe? And then there's a ton, there are hundreds of warning signs that you could look for, like somebody who complains about feeling hopeless. Hopelessness is that number one real underlying cause of suicide. People who are showing a lot of rage or acting recklessly or engaging in risky activities without thinking about the consequences. A change in appetite, if somebody gets really thin or if somebody gains a lot of weight. And another warning sign that I wanted to mention that is not a real obvious one is if you have a friend or know someone who has been in a depressed state, has been in a low state, and all of a sudden their mood lifts and they seem wonderfully happy, that actually is a really big warning sign. Because once someone who is experiencing hopelessness and depression makes the choice that they are going to end their lives, it lifts this weight. And all of a sudden they're happy again because they know there's an end to the struggle that they're dealing with. So that's a warning sign that you can look for. Unfortunately, though, it's so hard. A lot of the people that you'll talk to who have loved ones that have committed suicide, there weren't any warning signs because it's such hopelessness and isolation and loneliness are such hidden issues that a lot of times there simply aren't warning signs. So the best thing you can do is just always create that space that people can talk about what's going on inside. People can share what's going on in their hearts and in their heads because that's what's going to create connection, which battles the isolation. And then together you can look forward to hope. And if you encounter any of those warning signs, the most important thing is to stay calm and offer emotional support because that is the thing that people need. That's what I need. That's what you need. We all need that emotional support.
Yeah. And we should be direct if we see these warning signs, right? We should say something to the effect of, are you planning to kill yourself? Right?
Yeah, you can absolutely say that. Say, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? Are you depressed? Are you thinking about killing yourself? And when someone, so if someone actually will respond and say, yes, I've been thinking about killing myself, the odds of them killing themselves go down by like 40%. So even just having that conversation with someone and saying, hey, what's going on? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you depressed? How can I help? How can I be a support to you? Those are good questions to ask someone in those situations.
That's excellent advice. I really appreciate that, Christy. And I know everybody listening appreciates that as well. You brought up self-harm, and I want to talk about that for a minute. The numbers are equally as frightening in terms of self-harm. The statistics show 1 in 5 females and 1 in 7 males self-harm, and 157,000 young people are hospitalized for self-harm every single year. So are there some alternative coping strategies that can help somebody who is experiencing self-harm?
Absolutely. There are wonderful coping strategies, and it is frightening. The numbers are frightening. And if you look on social media and you do a quick Google search, the images are frightening for self-harm. And it is the thing that is honestly closest to my heart, because it's my struggle, is what I walked through. And the biggest thing, if you're experiencing self-harm, if you're hurting yourself, is to be patient with you, because self-harm is an addiction. It is not an easy thing to stop doing, because what happens is your body is your mind and your body are in this state of stress and anxiety. And then when you hurt yourself, these endorphins are released, and all of that goes away for like 1 minute, and you feel great. And then it all comes flooding back. So then you need to do it again and again. So it is an actual addiction. But there are really great ways that you can get out of it. And it took me a long time, honestly. So that's why I say be patient with yourself. But one great thing is to find things that will distract you. When you know that you're in a space, or you're going to be in a space that's going to give you stress or anxiety, put other things in your life that are going to distract you. Do you have a dog? Go outside and throw the ball with your dog, so that you are creating a new neural pathway. You're not doing the same thing. You're not going back to the same coping mechanism. Anything that is going to get you active is going to create happy endorphins in your body. So get outside and walk, dance, exercise. All of those are great things. Being organized so that you don't feel overwhelmed. That's a huge thing for me. I actually have a huge daily planner that I get in every morning, so that my brain is organized and that I'm not stressed so much about my day. So I'm taking things beforehand, and writing in a journal. Anything that's going to help you process emotions is going to help you. So journaling, art, painting, sculpting, all of those things. There's a lot of great things that you can do. The most important thing is, what do you enjoy doing? And let's put that in there. Create the space for the good thing first, so that then when the negative comes, you're already combating that and you're going somewhere else for your stress relief instead of going to hurting yourself. So those are some good things you can do.
I really like that advice. So let's talk a minute about eating disorders. I know this is something that is also happening on college campuses. 20 million women and 10 million men suffer from a clinically significant eating disorder at some point in their lives. And now with this rise of social media, Instagram, et cetera, I feel like this number is going to continue to grow. We're constantly comparing ourselves to somebody else's best day on Instagram, or some magazine ad that we're trying to reach for in terms of our own image. And so what are some different types of eating disorders that you've seen, and how can we help somebody who we know has an eating disorder?
It's a great question. And you're right. It used to be a billboard or a magazine that you'd pick up in the airport. But now every morning you wake up and you are faced with someone else's best morning, and everyone looks perfect, and every photo is airbrushed. And so it's a standard you simply can't live up to. So first of all, we've got that standard that we need to live up to. And then there is this need to control our lives. And those two things together are where eating disorders come in. When you feel a loss of control and that you're unable to hit that perfect standard. And so there are actually a lot of different types of eating disorders, more than we could even talk about today. And the number of eating disorders that are being identified are growing rapidly as our culture changes and shifts. So some of the more common ones that you will probably see day to day, or that you may have even heard of, are anorexia nervosa, and that is where you're starving yourself. You're simply not eating. And that's what we see as the stereotype when we think of an eating disorder. We see that skinny person with the rib cage showing and the big thigh gap and all of those things. Anorexia is actually the third most common chronic disease in young people right now. So, like, think of it this way: young people have asthma and they have diabetes, and then they have anorexia. Those are the prevalent chronic diseases right now. And so that's your stereotypical one. But there's a huge myth that eating disorders mean you're extremely thin. That's a myth. Most eating disorders actually don't have a weight issue, or you might be overweight. So when you're thinking about eating disorders, like, don't automatically look at the skinny person in your group and think, oh, they're the one that might have an eating disorder. So bulimia nervosa, which is another really common one that people talk about a lot, is where you binge. So you eat, and then you throw that out and purge, so that your body is not taking on the calories from that. Another eating disorder that's actually more common than those two, but people don't talk about it, and it's not treated very often, is a binge eating disorder. And that's where you have times in your life where you maybe get up at 3 a.m. and you go and eat everything in your fridge. And those people are generally not going to be thin. They're going to be overweight more often. So then you've got other specified feeding disorders that are similar to those three, but are not quite defined or typical enough to be one of those three. Another one is orthorexia, that we're seeing more and more of, especially as we, as a society, are looking towards organic foods, or this specific chemical is bad. Orthorexia is where you're obsessed with pure eating. So it's not about dieting. It's not about weight. It's not about eating healthy. It's about a focus on a purity of a food. So you might see someone who won't eat one specific thing. Maybe it's corn oil or whatever it is. And it's such an obsession with them that is actually an eating disorder. And then there's a lot of others that actually fall outside of the range of what we would consider normal. So some people will eat any food as long as it doesn't have any nutrients in it. So you might be eating Cheetos all day long, and that's all you're going to eat. And then there's one of the newer ones is the obsession with exercise and fitness. And we're not talking about like going to the gym a few times a week. We're talking about an obsession with exercising and fitness. And you might eat anything you want, but your obsession is with being in the gym or being fit. And that's all you can think about. That's all you talk about. And that becomes an eating disorder as well. How can we help someone? The biggest thing you can do is, much like with suicide, you want to ask them, hey, I've seen this specific thing, and this is concerning to me, and I care about you so much. Do you have a problem here? Is there an eating disorder here? And that's a hard thing. Like, honestly, if you have a friend that you think has an eating disorder, that's a very difficult thing. It takes a lot of courage to stand up and say something to them, because you may not get a good response. They may just say no. And then where do you go? That's a hard thing. So talk to them, though, is a big thing. And then listening. Listening is the biggest thing that you can do for anyone with any struggle, providing that safe space so that they can talk about the struggles that are going on within them, and encouraging them to find the support that they need. Because as much as you may love your friend or your family member, eating disorders are very serious. They can damage your body beyond repair, and they kill you. Eating disorders have a very high death rate. So you want to encourage them to get the help that they need. That is not you. And you be a support and you be a friend, but there are recovery groups that you can go to. There is therapy. There is medical help. There are all kinds of resources that you can find. And you can reach out and help find them those resources. But you want to get them that help, because eating disorders will destroy your body and will kill you. And then the biggest thing you can do for anyone is acceptance of where they are, because it's not gonna change overnight. So if you can provide that safe space where somebody feels like they are loved and accepted, and that you care about what's going on with them, then that's going to give them the courage that they need to get the help.
Wow. I'm so glad that we're talking about it. These are really difficult conversations, but necessary, just like you've indicated. I also wanted to talk a little bit about cyberbullying and just bullying in general. I think about my children. They both have cell phones, of course, the latest iPhone. And one of the things that I saw probably about a week ago was a screenshot of a form of cyberbullying that was captured on the cell phone of a young woman who was actually one of my students years ago. She actually died in 2017. And when I saw this screenshot of cyberbullying against her, it completely broke my heart. So how should I approach this topic with my children, or perhaps somebody has a younger brother or sister out there, when we're concerned that they might be experiencing bullying in some form, or maybe they're actually involved in bullying somebody else? How do we confront children today about this issue?
I'm so sorry. That's really heartbreaking to hear that. And unfortunately, it is a norm these days. I the reason I think it's so easy for young people to engage in cyberbullying is because when you have a screen in front of you, it's not a human being. You don't see what's in front of you as a person. And so you say things and you do things that you wouldn't do if that person was standing in front of you a lot of times. So you see a lot of kids who in everyday life and in real life are very kind people, but when you get online, it becomes a different thing. It's heartbreaking. It's horrible. The first thing, honestly, in your home, you have to create a space of openness and honest communication. And when you create that with your children, with your brothers or sisters, that is gonna open the doors for real communication and for real conversation. So, I tell parents every day that I talk to them, if you want to reach your kids, create a safe space to talk. We need to teach our kids how to be kind. We spend a lot of time trying to teach our kids to be great at sports, to teaching them that academics are very important. We need to teach them to be kind. We need to teach them that the person in front of them, even if it's on a screen, is a real human being that has feelings and can be hurt. And then we need to teach them how to respond in these situations. I think because it's such a new thing, technology has progressed so quickly in our lifetimes, that as parents, as anyone with a younger brother or sister, it's hard to know what to say. So we got to teach them how to respond. So the first thing is, just in general, in bullying, a bully wants a reaction out of you. So don't react. Like, don't respond in any way to a bully. Online, you don't tweet something back. You don't put a comment under there. You don't do anything. Don't respond at all. And tell an adult. So we got to teach our kids, who are the safe adults that we can go to? Who are the adults that we can trust, so that we can say, hey, this is happening to me. I don't know what to do about it. And we need to tell them not to be embarrassed. When you're bullied, when somebody says or does horrible things to you, it's very shameful, it's very hurtful, and it's embarrassing. And so we need to help our kids know that they don't need to be embarrassed, that it's not their fault, that it was not okay, that it's not right, and that they do need to tell an adult. Another thing is, we need to be very practical. So there are safeguards set up on the internet so that you can protect yourself, and we need to teach our kids how to do that. So we know how to do it, but are we teaching our kids? Keep your info private. Don't tell people your name or your age or where you are. That is that's standard across the board. And do your kids know how to block users? Blocking a user, I have had to block people on my social media accounts. And so that's something that I know how to do. Do your kids know how to do that? Because they should do that. If you're being bullied, you don't have to take it. You want to block that person. And then honestly, a lot of the social media sites are really set up so that you can report bullying on those sites. So teach them how to report, and teach them, walk through it together with them. Have that openness and that communication so that they're coming to you, and that even if they don't, you've given them the tools that they need to protect themselves.
Yeah, that's great advice for parents or anybody who has maybe a younger sibling. This is all very, very helpful. Now, I know there are a lot of college administrators out there listening, maybe treatment specialists that deal with all of these types of issues that we've just uncovered. And what happens with administrators or treatment specialists is that we tend to burn out because we might not love and value ourselves in the same way that we love all those people around us. So, how can professionals invest in ourselves so that way we're able to give our best to all the young people that we're serving?
That's a great question. So I myself have experienced burnout on a big level. Um, Self-care, self-care, self-care. You are important. I am important. And we feel like in this industry, a lot of times we feel like that there's so much need that we need to sacrifice who we are and our own personal peace and rest for other people because the job is so big. You know what? The problems are always going to be there. I think about when you sit on a plane, when you fly somewhere, and the flight attendant gets up there, the first thing they do is the safety instructions, right? And they say, and if there's an emergency and the cabin pressure drops, these oxygen masks are gonna drop out, and put your oxygen mask on. And if you're sitting with someone who's a child or who can't help themselves, put your mask on first, and then put the mask on the other person. Okay, this is what we're dealing with here. If you can't, if you are unconscious from lack of oxygen, you can't help anybody else. If I am not taking care of me, if I don't know how valuable I am, I don't know my identity, if I'm not rested, I can't help anyone else. And so that's what we're dealing with. So we're dealing with an entire group of people who's putting oxygen masks on everyone else in the plane, and we forgot to put on our own. So we got to set boundaries, guys. We have to set boundaries. We have to say no. We have to learn that no is the right answer about half the time. And that's a hard one because we don't like to say no because we see the problem and we see the solution and we want to solve it. The other thing is take a break. Go on a vacation. You got to get out of your headspace, and what you're going to come back with is going to be so much better and so much more. And breathe. I take a moment every day to just stop and quiet my mind and breathe. So what is it for you that's self-care? Where are you allowing time for the good and the refreshing and the rest in your life? And I mean, and the other thing is you have to accept that you can't change everything.
Yeah.
You can't. And when you can do those things, I think it gives us even more energy to meet even more needs. So yeah, self-care.
I love that plane analogy. It's so smart, and I can definitely see that's going to help a lot in terms of some of these administrators out there, making sure they take the time out for self-care. They certainly can't help anybody else if they have no oxygen, right? That's not going to happen. So I also, for any parents that might be out there, I think it's easy for me to see what's happening with my own kids because they're living underneath my roof, right? But when parents send their kids away to college, now, how can parents be still involved in preventing all of these problems like depression or self-harm that their children might be experiencing, but now they're away at school? So how can parents be involved when there's that separation?
The easiest way to make sure that stays forever is to create that safe space of openness and communication in your home while your kids are young. That's the number one thing you can do. So Mike, while your kids are at home, you create that safe space. And if you have that openness and communication and that consistent love and acceptance as a standard already, that's going to carry through and they're going to come back to you. They may go away, but they're going to come ask you for advice. The thing is, though, college is a crazy place, and at that age in a young person's life, that 18 to 25, they're really creating their own identity. They're trying to separate. They're becoming their own person. And so they may not reach out to you in the way that you would like them to, but you need to put in the work as a parent so that they are talking to you. So you call them, you go visit them, you ask the questions. Great leading questions are, hey, who are you hanging out with after class? What's your friend group? And so when you ask about a friend group, what you know then is if they've got friends that they're hanging out with, there is some level of peer support system there so that they're not isolated. You want to ask them the questions like, what kind of parties are you going to? How is your class load? How are you feeling about this? You keep that train of communication going. You drive that during this time. And you do that with love and acceptance and without judgment, because your kids are adults now. And what you want is not to drive them away or make them feel like you're going to be a judgmental parent. What you want is to create that safe space so that they are going to come to you and ask advice. And if you can do that, where you're creating that space, they are going to be open and honest with you, and they're going to ask you those questions.
Great advice. I hope you're right. That's all I can say. You know, for me, it's so important that my kids come back in one piece, and everything that I do is just, you know, in that vein is, you know, how can I make this college campus safe for them? And so you just worry when they go out on their own, do they still feel comfortable? And I'm hoping and praying that they still feel comfortable to come back and talk to me about stuff like that. So that's great. Now, Christy, I'm going to be going out in Nashville later tonight, okay? So I need advice from you. If I'm going to be going out in Nashville later tonight, where should I go to have a great meal, and what should I order, in your opinion?
Okay. So I've got a couple places for you to choose from, because I don't really know you very well and what you're looking for. But one of my absolute favorite restaurants is Fifth and Taylor. And it is a higher end sit down dinner. They have a fantastic menu that has a lot of versatility. So I love their goose pate. It's fantastic. They also have a thing called venison sweetbreads. Do you know what venison sweetbreads are?
I love venison. I don't know what a venison sweetbread is, but as soon as you said venison, I was game.
Okay, so venison sweetbreads, and I didn't know it until after I tried it. It's actually part of the thyroid or the thymus of the deer. So they take different parts and they fry it up, but it is fantastic. So they've got a great menu. I love that menu. If you're looking for something a little lower key with a great view of Nashville, the Rare Bird is a rooftop bar and cocktail club, and they have amazing drinks. They have great small bites, and you can see the entire city. It's a great view of the city. So if you're going to be there around sunset, I would go there. And it's relaxed, so it's couches and appetizers. And then my favorite, honestly, is Mas Tacos, which is in East Nashville. And they have the best street corn and a fantastic margarita. But if you're going to go there, you need cash, because they don't take credit cards.
Perfect. I think that's great for anybody who's visiting Nashville. I think I'm going to try that high-end place that you were talking about first. But here's the deal. I'm actually going to take maybe your credit card while we go, because I don't know if I want to spend that kind of money. All right, that's great. So Christy, so if there are students or administrators that want to talk to you a little bit more about some of these different programs that you offer for young people, for college students across the country, maybe invite you out to be a speaker on their campus, how can they contact you? How can they get more information?
It's really easy. We have a website. It's liveempowered.org, or you can email me directly at christy@liveempowered.org. Now, with Live Empowered, there's only one E in there, so it's LIVEMPOWERED.org. And my name is Christ with a Y on the end, so christy@liveempowered.org.
Very good. I appreciate that. I really appreciate everything that you've talked about here today. I know that you're helping people all over the country, literally, with this video here, because I know a lot of them are experiencing some of the things that we've talked about. Maybe there are people around them that have listened to this conversation, and now they're actually going to step in and get some help for the people that they care about. So I think we've done a ton of good work here today. I appreciate everything that you do. Can't wait to work with you on college campuses all across the country going forward over the years to come. And you're just a really special person. So I'm just very grateful and humbled that we met in person, and I just can't wait to see what the future brings.
Me too. Thanks. That's awesome. I love working with you too, Mike.
Thanks so much. And to everybody in our audience, thanks so much to listening to our 20th episode. Please share these videos if you like them. Make sure that you subscribe and you like our channel and our videos. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you on another episode of Fraternity Foodie. Bye for now.